It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. And it's Momo Feedback Friday. Right, Momo? Oh, you want a hug? Okay, we hug. Momo is attention starved lately, aren't you, Momo? Because Mummy's been editing and doing meetings, and Mummy's here but not here, and Momo's very upset. Yeah, don't tell them? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, Momo's gonna chill here. And if you want to see a boss fight preview, patrons got a sneak peek at what's coming up in Boss Fight Episode 3. So if you like that sort of thing, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. All right, so this is going to be a Feedback Friday where I'm going to start with a cheeky review just because it made me laugh. And I'll go into, I actually managed to play about 2.5, 3 hours of Cyberpunk. So I'm going to give you guys my first impressions, and then I'll get into a comment because I thought it was poignant and it made me think all the thoughts. Maybe I'll do a second one, but I'm not sure. I know I want to read these comments. Okay, so the first comment, like I said, I'm reading it because it's delightfully cheeky. It's from Vienticus Prime, and it says, review of this video. Leanna Kersner's video on the reviewing process provides a lot of food for thought. She spends the time not only going through a list of do's and don'ts when it comes to video game reviewing, but she also puts reasoning behind that list by going through the minutiae and the comparisons that show how different ways of expressing information relate to different circumstances. Her arguments are well organized and well rounded. I recommend this video for those who wish to learn ways to connect information to audiences in a more objective way. Rating 5 out of 10 because reasons. So there you have it. A review of my review of reviews of Cyberpunk. Like I said, I liked it. I thought it was cheeky. Okay, so my first impressions of Cyberpunk. This is not a full review. It's more of a level set for people who are still about to try the game. Things I wish I knew going in. It probably wouldn't have stopped me from playing it this early because it's Twitch, right? Like you gotta get in fairly early because of viewership and interest and all that stuff. But there were a lot of sort of technical jank I had to work out off the top, driver updates and settings and all that stuff. It still does not stream great, but at least it's not lagging on the play anymore. Like it looks great for me. It just doesn't look so good on the Twitch stream. It is both very slow to start and very overwhelming in how it doles out the gameplay features at the same time. And I admit I'm very surprised by that because it's a new IP. Nobody knows how to play this game. And it plays a little bit like Fallout, a little bit like a Tom Clancy property. People say it plays like Borderlands. I'm aware of Borderlands. I don't play Borderlands. But no reason. I just haven't. There's only so many game series you can play. But yeah, so it does a lot. There's a lot of features, and it's really sort of uneven in how it teaches you how to use those features. In some cases, it doesn't. There are pros and cons to both gamepad and keyboard and mouse. I don't find it's terribly well optimized for either. I'm sticking with keyboard and mouse just because I like that one-to-one aim. Maybe there's an aim assist on gamepad, I don't know, but the headshot zone is really tiny, and so I like having that like very exact aim. And also it's mouse over menus, and I do not want to mess with that on a gamepad. So I'm mucking through on keyboard and mouse because of that. But it's things like the heal button, the one to use like your bounce back or whatever the heck it's called, is right next to the crouch button. And it's really easy because it's a finger tilt. It's the X and the C. It's really easy to miss on that. Not as easy to fumble as other things. But yeah, it's not the nicest. It's not the worst keyboard and mouse controls I've ever used. It's not the best. It's certainly not the clarity of Doom, but it's not the mess of some other franchises. It's just like gamepad annoys me in some way. Keyboard and mouse annoys me in other ways. And I figure I'll adjust to the keyboard and mouse. The driving is really not. It's a lot of unnecessary movement in the driving, and you drive with WASD on keyboard and mouse controls, and it does feel really weird. But hopefully I won't have to drive that much. I'm not big on driving in open world games, period. That's why I liked Saints Row 4, because you just ran everywhere with superpowers. I thought that was cool. So that's sort of my... As for the game itself, the world is neat. They were wrong that there's no anti-capitalist message in it. It is basically a world where capitalism became unchecked, meaning 4 or 5 mega corporations basically took over everything else, and the attempts to stop it failed horribly. So everybody's in a world, a dystopia, where unchecked cronyism and corporatism run rampant, and everything is, for sale. There's very poignant moments where I'm playing the Street Kid origin, and it's, there's references to people dying at the age of 45 of curable diseases just because they can't afford it. And then they've got another thing like your really plum job, like 90% of your healthcare costs are covered, and 34% of employees are offered pensions. Like, it's little things like that I'm like, how did you, it's not that they're fighting against, corporatism and the really bad, like everything is run by a corporation kind of thing. They've already lost that fight. And if you miss the poignance in that, it's not the game's fault. The character creation things, it's interesting. You can do a lot of really, really interesting things with the face. But the body, there aren't that many options. There's like 3 different breast size, circumcised, uncircumcised. I ended up I looked at the lower parts customization, ended up just doing the panties with nothing, because I'm like, why do I care? Like, what? I'm not going to be running around the game naked anyway, so this is just weird. The female pubic hair options look like mold, so that was unfortunate, but I will give them kudos. The number of hairstyles was off the chain. I ended up going with space buns just because I'm a jerk. But the makeup options actually seem like a woman worked on the game, or they consulted a woman somehow. It was actually properly applied makeup, instead of that weird, like, we're going to just do a blob of color on her eye because look, makeup, that's how it works, right? That reminder of what you did when you were 6 and rated your mom's eyeshadow. Like, it's just so bad usually. So this was really good. Like, it's a marker of involvement. It's an interesting kind of inclusion. So kudos for that. The whole thing with the advertising, oh my God, what an overblown controversy. There are way, way raunchier ads in every single one is either hypersexualized, violent, or both. There are certain ads I can't even reenact because it will get flagged as not advertiser friendly on YouTube. So personally, I think that in the context of the game, it's not every ad is like that. And so again, it's like, do you totally exclude trans people, or do you make them part of the world, which means they're not treated very well? The game's openly racist. They established that in like the first 5 minutes. I'm playing the Street Kid origin, and there's a whole thing about one character says the only thing they did was they were brown, right? That's the only crime they committed. So the world's racist. The world's I pointed out that every woman has basically the same body. There are quite a few fat dudes in the first, 3 hours of the game. So there's obviously some sexism in the world, and that's, probably a deliberate choice in one way or another. It's not a good world. So the idea that a bad place, a dystopia, isn't allowed to have prejudice or bigotry so that it can say something about that prejudice or bigotry, I don't think is fair. Like, I think you need to be able to have that as valid content. The world's a giant crack den, except for V's apartment. Like, and it's kind of funny. There's a glitch where my hair disappears if I equip a hat, which was pretty funny. I'm like, where'd my hair go? I just think that whole controversy was extremely overblown, and you cannot single out one type of bigotry for particular criticism when the whole world is a dystopia and everything is bad. I mean, there are private, like, law enforcement armies, right, in the game. And they're mowing down regular people. There's a huge difference between the rich and the poor, and they're doing that thing where only, the regular people are living only to 45 because they can't afford healthcare, and rich people can get immortality through augmentations. So it's a terrible place. And personally, that's exactly what I expected. One Twitch commenter said that, much like the original IP, it is very much kind of a retro-futuristic 1980s anchor in the clothes and the hair and the sensibility. And I think that's a really good observation, that it is like the 80s just continued, right? I mean, people were wearing fanny packs all over the place. I'm like, oh. Because on the one hand, I recognize fanny packs don't make anyone look good, except for gay bike couriers for some reason. Those guys can rock that, but that was a joke. But a joke rooted in truth. Everybody else just is not flattering. But they're so useful. Like, everything you need is just right here, like a kangaroo pouch. Anyway, I will keep you guys posted about what I think as the game goes on. I don't want to judge it yet because it may just be really rough off the start. In a game that big, sometimes they don't roll out the features well. We'll see. I want to read this one comment that I'm like, this made me think all the things. So here we go. It's from Dwarven Hobble. On the whole, quote from what I said, why do Americans expect Poland to have the same kind of values as them? What's up with that? Unquote. Burger King. No, really. Everything can be explained by just looking at Burger King. I'm like, ooh. The mantra there is have it your way. An American can go to almost any country in the world, and if they want a Burger King, they can get one. They can walk into almost any branch and, short of some cultural differences, get roughly the same meals. I started chuckling at about this point. The U.S. is used to being catered to and being the dominant culture. They're used to all other media companies around the world mostly growing up on their media output and emulating their media. It's the idea of American exceptionalism that America is somehow unique and greatly powerful, with a lot of people in certain areas seeing themselves as elites and the forefront of cultural change, technological innovation, when they quite often aren't. But they don't know they're not, because that's the bubble they're in. It's the same people in the bubble who dunk on flyover states because in their view, only idiots live there with no real value or worth, often because the major news networks aren't located there, so they don't report on there often. Add to that some U.S. news networks reinforcing the bubble, spinning insane stories about other countries, and the people in that bubble have the idea that they're superior to the rest of the world reinforced. A number of people who like to see themselves as intellectuals at a number of places are the ones who also look down upon Japanese-made games as somehow lesser or inferior. often because of the cultural differences, because they believe themselves and their culture to be superior. And I just thought that, I'm like, yeah, and it's interesting because that's sort of the manifest destiny mentality that drove colonialism, right? And I think that's why gaming tends to always be in getting dumped on by this particular type of person, because it's not unlike film and television, that it is an urban phenomenon, right? Like there's New York, Chicago, LA, Atlanta in the US, Toronto, Vancouver, and then Montreal for French language in Canada, and then, the centers of like Bollywood, and then, Hong Kong cinema and Japanese stuff. But everything is localized in certain geographic areas. In gaming, you can open a game company anywhere. And gaming has an Eastern European wing. It has a Japanese wing. It has a Chinese wing. India is getting into it. Latin America's getting into it. And of course, there's like, Western Europe and the US and Canada. And of course, us up in Canada, we get the shit pile of both worlds because we do a ton of video game production up here. But we are a smaller market than Walmart. Just Walmart in the US. And so we get boned on things like pricing and, access in terms of media and all that stuff. That's the problem, is games media is very focused around that Bay Area thing. If you're not in, there's some stuff in the UK, but if you're not in those hubs, you go to the back of the line, or you can't get to those hubs. It's ludicrously expensive to stay anywhere for GDC. Same with E3, but GDC is way more expensive. So there's some of that old media clashing with the flexibility of games, not just culturally, but just economically. And so there are certain portions of the media that exists surrounding video games that is really quite entitled. Which is funny because they're the exact people that are leveling the entitlement criticism on gamers, right? And so it's one of those things where I almost wonder, and again, I'm just going to state this theory because the game is kind of rough. And with Cyberpunk, I'm concerned that there was such a shitstorm before the game released that reviewers were actually afraid to get to be consumer advocates by disappointing people by saying, essentially it's a solid 7 out of 10, because it was sitting at like a 91 on Metacritic, and that doesn't serve the public either, right? There are a lot of very enjoyable 7 out of 10 gaming experience. They tend to be my favorite ones. But I think there was just so much heat around this game that nobody went into it without a bias, which is too bad. And I'm saying this now so that when I get further into the game and when I give you guys kind of my overall thoughts when I eventually finish it, I'm sort of, declaring this is my concern. Right now, if it doesn't get better, it's not living up to the hype. Now, it could get like amazing later on. It could just be a rough start, right? And I'm not talking because of the bugs. I'm just talking because of the way it rolls out and the pacing, and that there aren't any characters I really care about yet, though a lot of people in chat seem very attached to Jackie, so I'm assuming that kind of rolls out in a cool way. Again, I'm saying this because if I end up loving the game, you guys know I went into it after my first 3 hours concerned, and it grew on me. This is the nice thing about doing this in this format is you guys get to see transparently, just exactly like Bug Snacks. I went in and actually had to kind of lie down after the first play. I was kind of sickened by all the body horror with fruit. I ended up really enjoying the game because it was supposed to be horrifying. So I personally like doing check-in things, almost like gonzoing it. Gonzo journalism, not the other kind of gonzo. There are three kinds of gonzo, not the Muppet either, and not the thing that's not the Muppet, not journalism. But yeah, I want to be honest, and not because I'm trying to, and this is the thing. I never feel the need to try to convert people to not play a game or convert people to play a game. My goal is, if you decide to buy this game, you go in with a reasonable expectation. And if that means a bunch of people tell me off because I was honest and it didn't match the hype, then I did my job. It's not my problem that people, because they haven't played the game yet, and then they play the game and they'll realize I was right and not be able to admit it. Because that's what fans of anything do. And again, I'll remind people who are new to this. I used to work in youth music programming. And girls with boy bands, exactly the same as gamers as their favorite IPs. There's really no difference. None at all. Anybody tells you there's a difference, they're lying. It's just people who really, really love certain things. They get very attached to it and very defensive of it. So that getting into the idea that Americans expect everything to cater to them, I do think that's something that needs to be watched when a game is not made in America. And yes, all games kind of cater to, well, certain games are not, America seen as a secondary market. They're Japanese games released in Japan. America's sort of an afterthought. Sometimes they do very well, sometimes they don't. But most games are like, they want American dollars. They just do. And so, yes, there's an element of catering to America. But I think it's cool that we can get different perspectives through games, and that American perspective becomes less dominant in terms of ideas. That's what I think makes gaming cool and special in terms of media. So why would we work against that? Why wouldn't we lean into that? It's the same way, less and less now because BioWare Austin's doing more and more stuff. But BioWare games used to feel Canadian, basically, with our approach to inclusion and all that stuff. You could tell it was a Canadian game because it's always like gay people, cool. Brown people, cool. Like, it was really, really different up here in that regard than America, just structurally. Our system works where the government one day goes, well, these people are protected, and everybody screams and yells for like 6 months, and then it's all shrug and back to it. That's the way things work in Canada. We don't have these decades-long fights over these things. That doesn't mean we don't have problems. We do, but they're just different problems, right? So I think it's a good thing, and I don't think we should discourage game companies from other countries for to tell their stories just because it's gonna ruffle American reviewers the wrong way, right? We shouldn't be doing that. That's kind of the exact opposite to everything the social justice types claim they're for. Just saying. All right. I'll leave it there. Thank you guys so much for the support. Next week, because I'm going to have to compile the feedback and then shoot the feedback. I'm going to continue with Cyberpunk stuff, because let's face it, it's the big game of the holidays. But I'm going to start compiling, asking specific questions for the holiday programming, which my retrospective stuff, this year is not going to be like games or anything like that. It's going to be focused on you guys, because the allowing you guys to just speak your truths seems to be very healing and seems to be very uplifting, and it's definitely made the comment section feel less agitated. So to me, that's a really nice holiday sentiment, and you guys seem to enjoy watching videos about each other's feedback and my sort of reactions to it. And again, my goal is not to disagree when I read a comment. My goal is to sort of validate the sentiment in the comments I read. So definitely between Christmas and New Year's, there's certain things I have to do. So I would like to bank as much content as I possibly can starting next week. So I can get caught up on some other things and, finish Boss Fight episode 3 before Christmas. So what kind of general topics would you guys like to address? I will let you know masculinity will be one of them. The idea of, I don't know how to say it, but a response to sort of, it's okay to beat on white dudes. That's going to be part of it. So you don't have to nominate that stuff. That stuff's going to be in there. But what other things do you sort of general topics would you like to see feedback on? Let me know in the comments. Until then, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching.